What's up, my fellow Shield Brothers? Shield Brother 6 here with another A Day in the Life on this wonderful Monday. Today we're going to be talking about the armament in the Anglo-Saxon period of England, which is a very diverse period and a very long-lasting period because it lasts for about roughly 600 years, and through those centuries a lot of development and variations happened, and so we're going to talk a little bit about that today, as well as they have a very unique sense of unity with the Frankish developments and Norman, but they're also very unique in their own way. So let's get started for today. The Anglo-Saxon weapons. Many different weapons were created and used in Anglo-Saxon England, encompassing the 5th through 11th centuries. They adapted and improved a variety of weapons ranged from spear to bows and armor. Weapons also had a very symbolic value for the Anglo-Saxons, and apparently they had a very strong connection to gender and social status. Weapons were commonly included as grave goods in the early Anglo-Saxon burials, which is where we get a lot of our material and archaeological findings for this period. The info on these weapons. Weapons also had symbolic value for the Anglo-Saxons, having strong connections to genders and social statuses. Weapons were commonly included, blah blah blah, I just said that. The vast majority of these weapons were buried in male graves, although there are armor findings and spear findings and female graves, but that was very rare exceptions. The establishment of the literature and literary Christian clergy who could read and write in Anglo-Saxon England resulted in the production of several texts, sources which we still use today, describing weapons and their usage in battle, and they were very iconic and very helpful in helping us understand what they used and how they used them. Some of these literary sources include the poems such as Beowulf and the Battle of Maldon. Let's continue. The weapon types. Well, first off, there's the polearms. I'm including here the spears and javelins because yes, the javelins are ranged, but they could also be used in polearm fashion, and they were very iconic for the battle formations used by the Anglo-Saxons. The spears. They have been found in about 85% of weapon-containing Anglo-Saxon graves. So, overall, approximately 40% of adult male graves from this period contain spears. Through the centuries, 11 variants of spears were used by Anglo-Saxons. The javelin. The javelin was also used in hand-to-hand combat as well as ranged. It is possible that these javelins, known as engons, developed from the Roman army's pilum. In Anglo-Saxon England, the male side of the family was known as the spear side, because the male was the one who used the spear and did the protecting and fighting. And due to this, and it was so ingrained in their culture, that the male side was called the spear side. It could also be used in a different kind of joke. The shield wall formations were also known as Skaldbur, which means shield fortress, and Bordwell, which means board wall, and Wihagen, which meant a war hedge. Those were all three different names used by the Anglo-Saxons in describing their shield wall formations. Hand weapons. There are three main types of hand weapons used by the Anglo-Saxons. There was the Skremasieks, which is very similar to the Saxes of the Vikings, but it was a common man's weapon that was used during the 6th and 7th centuries. And it was a single-edged knife, and the term Skramsax is a term covering a wide variety of knives, from small eating knives to large combat knives. But for the sake of simplicity, the term Skramsax shall only be used to describe the weapon in this section that we're covering, just the military use. The typical Skramsax of the migration period, which when they were coming over from the continent, as found on the continent, is about 8 to 14 inches, along with a asymmetrical tang. And then the larger Skramsax, which was beyond 14 inches, more of a, let's say, dagger, what did not appear in England until the later part of the pagan period. But as for the swords, historian Guy Falsall referred to it as the most treasured item of the early medieval military equipment. These Anglo-Saxon blades, the tang included, typically measured 86 to 94 centimeters, which is 34 to 37 inches. in length and 4.5 to 5.5 width, usually dual-sided with a blade on each side, much like the Viking blades I described in my last video. A few swords bore runic inscriptions due to their Germanic heritage. A 6th century example found in Gilton in Kent had an inscription saying that Sigmir made the sword. There's also textual sources indicating that swords were sometimes given names, such as the hunting sword from Beowulf. The other type of hand weapon that I mentioned, the third type, is the axe. One special type of axe, found in sufficient numbers, is the Francesca. It's a type of curved blade-handled axe, which originated amongst the Franks, hence the name Francesca, and it was designed primarily for throwing. Due to the curvature of its handle, it got you very good range and accuracy. Axes were found in roughly 3% of the Anglo-Saxon burials that contained weapons. So not a lot of axes, but there was enough to mention. So you could use this in hand-to-hand, but it was primarily used throwing. So let's get on to our next type of weapon. The ranged weapons. There was two types, although neither one of them were really used that much in combat. There was the bows and the slings. Bows and arrows do seem to have been used, but they were a much lesser extent than on the continent. Iron arrowheads are found in about 1% of Anglo-Saxon graves. It is suggested that the maximum shooting distance for Anglo-Saxon bows would have been about 150 to 200 meters. However, it is also noted that the power of the arrow would have been greatly diminished due to the U-bows that they were using, that anything beyond 100 to 120 meters would have been rather diminished in power and would only cause minor wounds. Another type of ranged weapon is, of course, the sling. The sling, however, was mostly used for hunting, and you would, hit a bird, hit a squirrel, hit a rabbit with your stone. Although, the Vita Sancti Wilfrithi, an 8th century hagiography of St. Wilfrid, records an event in which the saint and his companions were attacked by pagans, and when their ship ran aground. So one of his companions launched a stone from a sling, killing a pagan priest. Although, how much of that is true, we don't know. So let's get into the armor now. The armor, there were three main types of armor sections. There's the shield, the helms, and the body part, which is the mail. The shields, they used a type of round shield. The shield was an extremely common piece of war equipment used by the Anglo-Saxons. Nearly 25% of male Anglo-Saxon graves contained a type of shield. This was the main defensive item of the Anglo-Saxon warrior, and it was used in all types of combat, either hand-to-hand single or shield wall, which was extremely well used, as we mentioned earlier with the three types. They used a type of round shield in combat with a diameter of 16 to 36 inches, and the usual size being between 24 and 28 inches. As for the helms, for most warriors, the shield was the only sense of protection, but wealthy warriors and higher-ups could afford a helmet. However, late Anglo-Saxon literature, such as Beowulf, also makes some references to helmets worn. Helmets varied widely through the centuries by year and geography, because in Jorvik, which became York, there was a type of helmet found, but then in Western England, there was a different type of helmet found. And about 1066, the leader at the time commissioned everyone to be made a iron helm. So it really depended on what part of the Anglo-Saxon period you were looking on, which makes it very difficult since it had such a large range of years within it. Mail armor. So the most wealthy warriors wore a mail shirt, or, it's chainmail. But it was probably no larger than a modern day t-shirt, and it was nowhere large as the larger later splint, the hauberk. The mail shirt was probably worn over a leather jerkin or padded undergarment to prevent the mail, if it was pierced, to go into the human body. So this padded armor garment was probably only started becoming of use when the Viking raids started. And that's because they started to use larger and heavier weapons, which was puncturing the mail and pushing it into the body. So they wore the jerkin underneath to protect the puncture to be minimized, as well as prevent the mail pieces to going into the body. In Old English, the mail armor was referred to as a burn or hinleke. It is frequently referred in to the late Anglo-Saxon literature, but few examples have actually been found archaeologically. There you can see a scene from the Bow Tapestry showing Norman and Anglo-Saxon soldiers wearing coats of mail. Bottom right there. Thank you so much for watching. This has been Shield Brother 6 with another A Day in the Life. I have one thing to request of you guys today. Down below in the comment section, I want to know if you want me to keep doing these A Day in the Life with a different type of armaments, or I can start doing a alternate history Mondays. I want to know what you guys think, and you can let me know in the comment section down below. As always, if you liked, leave me a like. If you didn't, go ahead and leave me a dislike. This has been Shield Brother 6, and as always, I'll catch y'all next time.